Hi everyone, and welcome back to Look Back Reviews. Have you ever thought, you know what this gritty first-person shooter needs? Lots more colour, a million more guns, and an antagonist we actually like more than any other character in the game.
You see the problem here? You're still alive. So if you could just do me a favor and off yourself, that'd be great. Thanks, Pumpkin.
Oh, and a robot that's more optimistic than EA when you open up your wallet.
Well done! Your ability to walk short distances without dying will be Handsome Jack's downfall.
In that case, may I introduce to you Borderlands 2, a game where fun, goofy and epic gameplay become the vocal point of the experience. This game has a strong identity and follows it through with its presentation, storytelling and gameplay experience. I've played this game for about a dozen times, and it's nice to play a game where I can just shut my brain off and blur some steam while having a good few laughs along the way. I think it's important for gameplay to be one of, if not, one of the most important aspects of a game, but it shouldn't mean that the rest is sacrificed just to achieve this one goal. So let's have a deep dive into one of Gearbox's most loved series and see what makes people still play it to this day.
Well, it was nice knowing you. I hear getting eaten alive by bullybogs isn't such a bad way to go.
Gearbox first launched the original Borderlands on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in late 2009. The game earned praise for its game genre of being a first-person RPG with an addictive loot system with fun multiplayer co-op story missions. The sequel Borderlands 2 launched on the 18th of September 2012 and is very similar in concept to the first game. It has mostly focused on refining the game to improve and polish the overall experience. It is true that not much has changed since your first visit to Pandora, but on the face of it, it is just enough to justify a new game over a large DLC. You still pick a character with a skill tree to invest in. It still focuses on all those guns with a loot-based reward system, encouraging you to keep going to that next big loot drop. You still get the same humour throughout the game, and its emphasis on playing in multiplayer is strengthened by letting you know in just about every loading screen there's a better chance of getting better loot if you're playing in co-op. On paper, it sounds like there'd be not much point in playing this game if you have played the first Borderlands. But the charm this game has is what separates it from the first Borderlands, which struggled to make an impact when it came out back in 2009. The original game was never bad, but it felt underwhelming at times. Gearbox has used this as a stepping stone and built on top of it rather than expanding outwards. Some people would criticise a company for doing this, and you'd be able to understand if they did. But in this game, there's a mission where you just shoot somebody in the face. Now that's a game I want to play. The game uses an eye-catching cel-shaded style, which means it has aged really well, along with the ease of being able to be ported to multiple platforms without noticeable graphical issues. The style fits well with its almost cartoony action gameplay and helps to bring you into the world you're playing in. It also manages to look not too intimidating to any new players, despite with what can be some rather complex RPG systems going on in the background. It has an easy to use interface with good descriptions of what every item can do, and is displayed in cool cartoony style menus as well. The game also sports health bars for every enemy character, with damage numbers which are colour coded to the type of gun and damage you're using. All this leads to an easy to pick up and understand game, while making it not look too simple and boring. Throughout the game, the different locations and areas were always interesting to visit, and did have some specific enemies and bosses to their locations. Each area helped to tell a little bit more of the story, with visits to rebellion and bandit strongholds, nature reserves, Hyperion robot factories, and vast open deserts and wasteland areas. One noticeable place though where the game does fall down is in the character variety. It seems to fall into the trope of presenting you the same enemies, but in a different colour, to let you know it is the same enemy type, but slightly harder. I totally get that at the time, this game was trying to be marketed to a broad audience with a focus on multiplayer, so it makes sense to all players to know what enemy you were up against by keeping the enemies similar. But when you consider how much didn't change from the first game, it can sometimes come across as a little lazy. I think it's fair to say that in the early game, there's no shortage of different enemy types, and you do have some enemies that are specific to different areas, but they do become more rare and more scarce as the game goes on. The bosses, in contrast, were always really outrageous and crazy looking, but managed to look fitting with the game's overall tone, and didn't feel out of place at all. You could argue that some are just more beefed up versions of some basic enemies, but these were rare and only really appeared in the early game. The explosions and other visual effects can look a little bit rough, but do fit in with the game's style. The game did come out a while ago now, some effects just have not aged as well as the game's overall appearance has. The sound effects are punchy and do a decent job to inform the player of what's going on around you. The characters are voiced really well in cutscenes and missions, while again retaining some of those funny voice lines, and even during critical story points can make you laugh. During combat, the voice lines and quotes you hear from enemies are just funny additions to the gameplay. They help to push the game's fun and slapstick tone once again.
You give up, we'll just shoot you in the head. Clean and a hell of a lot less painful than what handsome John.
Nobody kills my buddies but me!
Where I do get a little confused though is with the game's music. Borderlands sets itself up to be this big, loud, stupidly fun game, and during combat the music is okay. Music in the open world, however, is very flat and boring. The music during combat sounds like an epic sci-fi / country adventure, and goes a long way to getting that action feel right. It seems to work whether you're in a sniper fight or busting down someone's face with your foot, so I commend it for that. It feels like the music is trying to pull the game into a much more serious place though. It's not somewhere I think it needs to go, as it doesn't really match the rest of the game's overall tone. And the normal overworld music is very dry, it's very mellow, it's too mellow. It makes travelling long distances through areas really boring and drag on. There are some story points where I can see it being a good idea, but it feels like they just couldn't come up with any music to hit the right tones when travelling between missions or just in the open world on its own. I would want something a little more punchy or light-hearted. At the moment, I sometimes turn it off altogether and play music on my own devices instead, just as it makes those moments more bearable and you'll end up listening to that backing track a lot. Fun, addictive and enjoyable. That's how I would describe this game to most people. The gameplay loop is something that keeps me coming back to this game again and again, playthrough after playthrough. There's just something exciting about taking down a massive boss and finding a new gun that blows your old one out the water, or just opening up a portal loop to find an amazing shield or class specific modification I can slap on my character. The mission structure is as follows: kill all enemies, move on to the next area, kill enemies, move on to the next area, kill more enemies, etc, etc. Borderlands 2 doesn't rewrite the script on first person shooters, but it does a fantastic job at making it fun and a rewarding experience. It sounds like it shouldn't work and become stale, but it doesn't. The explosions, the elemental weapons, the random comical screams, those funny voice lines, and the fast-paced action gel really well. Regardless of its age, it's still fun to come back and play. The game is better with friends in co-op or with strangers, but I have played it through multiple times solo, and I can confirm it still holds up. Some things to point out though is that a lot of the side missions can be skipped over. They're all optional, but they may be required to level up your character. To explain this further, you gain experience and level up by killing enemies, discovering new areas and completing those story and side missions. With each level up you earn a skill point to put towards your character's specific skill tree, and it has various effects on your characters. But more importantly, it means any gear you find is also assigned a level, much like World of Warcraft or Destiny. For example, if you're doing a mission that's specific for level 5, you're going to find gear at level 5. If you're doing a mission that's recommended for say level 6 but you are currently a level 5, you're going to most likely find level 5/6 guns, but you won't be able to equip any of that gear until you are level 6 if it's a level 6 gun you're looking at. The higher level weapons do tend to do more damage, but the various effects are random, so it's not always guaranteed that a higher level weapon will be better than the one you're sporting at the time. The missions don't stop you starting a mission though, even if you're well below the recommended level. If for example you're trying to complete a mission with a level 5 character and a recommended level to complete it is level 10, you're going to have a harder time completing it. It's not going to be impossible, but it's going to take you way longer to do. You might also find that you're running out of ammo a lot as the enemies are just absorbing your bullets, but again, it's not impossible. What's good to know is that you can't really fail a mission either. When you do die, you'll respawn at a checkpoint normally no more than 5 minutes back, and boss fights have a checkpoint right before them, so you won't lose any progress. The only caveat is that you'll lose a small percentage of your money. In normal areas, enemies don't respawn when you die. However, enemies still alive and bosses will have a nice full health bar when you come back to the fight. Oh, good. It's there to stop you abusing the system if you found out that dying was quicker than waiting for your health and shields to recover. But if you are playing in co-op, as long as one player is still alive, the enemies won't regenerate their health when a player dies. Being an appropriate level for these missions then is a bonus. It can be really felt if you do try take on a boss at a much higher level than yourself. I did sometimes feel like I didn't want to complete those side missions, but felt like I had to gain the necessary experience to level up and progress. Some missions can be very boring fetch quests, but some can involve hunting a certain monster or finding a certain item in a particular location. The side missions can be linked to the main mission areas as well, meaning that you only have to go through the whole ordeal once, completing a few objectives in one run. However, most are not, and only become available to you once you've already been through the area, which means the area requires multiple playthroughs to complete all the missions. This is where the grind comes in, and why the game is better in co-op, as the problem is reduced when done with another Vault Hunter who can help the task in hand. On my own though, it can sometimes feel like a slog and does put me off going back. I just want to point out that for the main missions and some side missions, this wasn't a problem at all, and the experience was still really fun. But when I did need to grind some of the side missions, with that really downbeat soundtrack, it would sometimes make me think, do I really want to do this again? The thing that does keep me coming back though, is all those amazing guns. Or rubbish guns, it's a bit random really. But the hope of getting a bigger, better gun kept me coming back again and again for the same story and side missions. The shooting mechanics are very good and comparable to any Call of Duty or Battlefield game I've ever played. The button placement is set to what I would call the standard, so if you've played any shooting games in the last 10 years or so, you know what we're looking at. You do also have the option to change up the control scheme if you want. I would stream this game to my Vita and found that the option's really handy as you don't have proper R2 and L2 buttons, so I switched the shoot and aim buttons to the L1 and R1, and it made the world of difference. You even have the option with the Handsome Jack collection to increase your field of view, something that does help with first person shooting games and something I do take advantage of. The gameplay is a bit like comparing Forza to Mario Kart, if Forza was your Call of Duty and Mario Kart was your Borderlands 2. Forza is a very realistic game and it's amazing for those exact reasons, but we all know Mario Kart is more fun to play. Borderlands 2 does indeed have a story, surprisingly, and it's surprisingly okay for a daft game like Borderlands. I don't mean that to sound insulting, it's just with this kind of gameplay, I'm surprised they could fit in a story around it, but they have, and it works. It starts off a little slow, with the only known fact being that a chap called Handsome Jack is trying to get to the vault, and this is bad, for reasons. But over time we get more information through conversations and holotapes you can pick up. All conversations are done either face to face or over a small screen on your HUD. You can walk away from characters as they're talking to you face to face, so if you know which direction to go in, you can start making your way there before the conversation is finished. As you walk away, their voice becomes more quieter and quieter, until it just becomes a screen on your HUD. This is really good as it keeps the gameplay flowing, and especially for me who's been through it multiple times, it means I'm not wasting time standing around listening to conversation I don't need to hear again. This does mean you lose out on some of the impact the story has to offer, but it's made up with some really brilliant writing and voice acting. So if we were going over more important story conversations, I felt incentivized to listen to it, as it was often funny, and I felt rewarded for paying attention.
Looking for Bloodwing? Oh, I moved her a few hours ago. Somewhere a little more dramatic.
There are a few ongoing jokes with characters as well, so again, I felt rewarded and entertained when I heard them pop up in conversation. The story does have a few big twists throughout, and keeps me moving on to that next area and next boss. Although I won't say it's the driving factor of the game, it does help me appreciate Handsome Jack a lot more than I thought I would do as well, compared to the first few interactions you have with him at the start of the game.
Hey, how did Buckles suck? How's your day been, buddy? We haven't really talked much since I left you for dead. Hey, you think you'll freeze to death out there? No, probably not. Bandits will get you first. My day? Been pretty good. Just bought a pony made of diamonds. Yeah, because I'm rich. So, you know, that's cool. Goodbye.
The characters in this game are just glorified mission givers, but that's not to say they don't have charm. You'll be doing most of the heavy lifting in the game, so it's hard to think of them as much more until later on when the plot gives you some more information and facts about them. The humour is what sells the characters, and is by far and away the best quality. Lilith is a sarcastic punk rocker. Handsome Jack is the classic company president, with a huge ego and is constantly messaging you with passing insults throughout the game. Scooter is a plain talking mechanic and says it all as it is, with a massive smile on his face. Moxie is a sexy bartender with a mysterious past. Claptrap is the second coming of Jesus, and Crazy Earl is, well,
Welcome to the black market! Don't tell your friends.
crazy. All the characters have their own angle, but humour is where they all stem from. You might think it gets old or it's not very inventive, but just like the combat, it gels surprisingly well. They don't do anything to break the mould, but to have written this much genuinely funny stuff is impressive and shouldn't be underestimated. Your character is a silent protagonist type. Game developers do this so it feels more like it's you in the game rather than you playing as a game character, so you don't really develop in a story capacity. The other characters you interact with though do change throughout the game, but none as much as Handsome Jack and Lilith. Both either have gone or go through some twists and turns as we progress, and as we learn more, we really do get to the core of these characters. It's not very deep, but it is bigger than a paddling pool. To summarise, the story does its job, but not much more. It's not something you're going to compare to The Last of Us, but it is quite well paced and made me laugh more times than I've ever done while playing any other video game. The mission variety is the same a lot of the time. Go to an area, clear the area out of enemies, and move on. All this works well, all things considered. The difficulty tends to be pretty fair, and I never thought I was either too powerful or too weak for an area or boss. A lot of that comes down to your own inventory management though, to keep your good guns and sell or drop the bad ones. It's also fun finding all the new areas and seeing what the game has in store for me, even if getting there can sometimes be a little dull. Moving through these areas, shooting at everything in sight with that country dubstep backing track did feel really invigorating during combat. Trying to move through the area and trying to avoid getting surrounded is also a fun way to stop the player coasting through missions. The game makes you work for those 10 yards forward. It's not afraid to push back and make you retreat behind cover. As mentioned earlier, the game does get harder with extra players, so more players means more enemies means better loot, and I think a better experience. I know I said the game is fair, but sometimes I appreciate the extra challenge. Trying to kill all those extra enemies, struggling through and finally beating that boss was such a good feeling. The side missions will normally involve killing a number of enemies, or collecting a certain amount of X from X location and bringing it back to an NPC. There are a few exceptions, like a battle style arena you get a few hours into the game, and it feels like a good change of pace and just lets you have fun killing waves of enemies. The enemy AI is not too punishing, but sometimes feels like I'm playing against stormtroopers with their aim. If you do try and close the gap, they do aim better, and this is where they can become punishing, and closing the gap on you before you can react. I do like how they don't just wait there and stay behind cover, they often bring the fight to you. The puzzle then is trying to figure out what's the best way to outsmart them. Do you outgun them or outmaneuver them? Apart from this, it's more of the same as the game goes on. It's not bad, but it's nothing groundbreaking either. For performance, I'm sure you're all well aware now I have a standard PS4, and the game runs okay. It does suffer from a few frame skips every now and again, and that's when a lot is happening on screen. The game's cel-shaded graphics are a lot less intensive than more realistic games, so my PS4 doesn't sound like a lawnmower for a change. Borderlands 2 I feel is a great game for newer players. It has fun, addictive gameplay with a loot system simple to understand and get hooked on. It plays pretty similar to most first-person shooters I've played, and it introduces wider mechanics like skill points, elemental weapons and other RPG-like mechanics slowly, while still holding most casual players with the humour and fun gameplay. Does it break the mould of what a game should be? Probably not, but it looks incredible and it's still really fun to play, and you can't say that about most games that came out in 2012. If you want to chill out, not think too much and have a laugh, then this is the game for you. My score for this is a 7 out of 10, but please don't think this is a bad score. Out of all the games I play, I find that Borderlands is one of the most accessible games to recommend to my friends. I have spent hundreds of hours in Pandora, across the 360 and the PS4 versions. I don't regret it at all. The downsides for me are just the repetitive gameplay, the soundtrack and poor animations from all the NPCs throughout the full game. I think though, my issues with the game may not be issues for some, and if you do like the sound of this game, I can guarantee you'll have a big goofy smile on your face for the majority of your playthrough.
It's cute that y'all think you're the heroes of this little adventure, but you're not. Welcome to Pandora, kiddos.
I just want to say thank you for watching, and if you do know anybody that would like this video, please give it a share and a like. It goes a long way for helping me make another one of these videos. So just thank you so much. As always, leave your comments below if you agree or disagree with the review, and do consider subscribing to BazMan Reviews if you want to get notifications of when I do upload. I do stream every Tuesday on Twitch at the moment at 8 PM. I do that at twitch.tv/BazMan1991, so if you want to come chat, I'd love to see you there. I'll leave all my links in the comments below. But just thank you so much. There are other reviews, and if you want to watch them, I'll leave a link for them as well. But just have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for popping by.